morning to everyone. Don's going to give me some help by, I think, feeding some questions as we move through this morning on the chat panel. So please keep those feeding through. And I'm going to also just drop a couple of questions out to everyone there as well. So please, as we go through, make sure you feed those in too.
Thank you, Martin.
The title, as it suggests, is really to look at the changing role of video in learning from not just the perspective of VideoArts, but also from the perspective of our client base around the UK and indeed around the world. So we'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at some research feedback that we just had in from our annual tracking survey. We'll be looking at some video clips, and I'll also pick on just a couple of case studies as examples as well. In case you're ready for a first question, here it is. So it would be great to start getting some feedback from all of you out there of how you see the world of changing, see the world of learning changing. And as I say, I'll be sharing my thoughts, but also some of those of the tracking survey as well over the next half hour or so. In case some of you out there are less familiar with VideoArts, I'm going to do a couple of things just to bring our organisation and our background up to speed for you. We are very much focused as a provider of video-based learning and video-based content. And that can be off the shelf, or more increasingly, it can be where we work.
Can I say for a second, we're getting some
our clients
really interesting stuff coming through, Martin.
Customize or create learning.
Just have a look at it. We've got a shift from push to pull, says Charles Jennings.
From scratch.
A big increase in informal. Andrew's talking about digital natives, and a lot of a shift towards mobile, instant, shorter time scales, and smaller sizes of content. Collaborative, says Jonathan. Chunks. Yeah, lots of this coming through. Sorry, back to you, Martin.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. And again, that's all very encouraging, because that all rings very true with what I'm going to come on to a little later as well, Don. So it's not just about content, much more now. It's what's the context that people are delivering learning, and I think that idea of push and of informal learning plays a big role in that. And there is then the current structure, certainly in terms of online learning, of where a learning management system fits in, and where a content-focused provider like us has to work and will work with an existing platform or help to create an environment or platform. So that's a little bit of background. I'm going to actually put it much more into context of who VideoArts are, though, by asking you to have a look at the first YouTube link. You'll see I've just put in the chat panel 3 links, but I'm going to ask you to look at the top one, which is video 1. And that really does much better than I ever could do.
And
an
because
introduction
that's going
to
to drift off the
screen,
Cleese, I'm just going to
lasts about a minute and a half. So please go to that link, and take a look at that now, and then I will join you back to continue after you've reviewed the clip.
And thank you, Dana, for dropping the link in as well.
Oh, thank you, Don.
And Dana's also put in the link, very importantly, for people who can't get to YouTube. Okay.
Oh, great.
Martin, it looks to me like we have about a minute. Okay, I'll leave it to you.
Oh, I think some people haven't quite finished on. Hold on. Great. I think we're finished now. So everyone goes at a little bit at their own speed with video in terms of streaming that. So I'll try and keep an eye on that and bring us all back together like that next time through as well. I see some nice comments there from the John Cleese fans out there, and as many of you will know, John Cleese was the founder of VideoArts along with Tony Jay back in 1972. And he very eloquently puts the case that lots of things have changed in the world of learning, but the fact that people need to be engaged and entertained is still a driving factor. I've moved on now in terms of our presentation to try and put that, I think, more, Don, in a context of how we've seen the world of learning as a producer of content. And as John Cleese says, we started in the 70s in a world of very much classroom-based training. So a 16mm film, by its very nature, stood on a projector, and you could pretty much only ever watch that in a classroom full of people with the lights dimmed and the curtains drawn. And that really did dictate how people learned and had to learn in a video-based environment as a group, whether it was corporate training or whether it was in an academic institution. Video had to live in a classroom. It started to change really as we moved from analog into the early digital world in the 80s, and we'll all remember the rise of VHS, the introduction of the first computers in the workplace, and then with that the introduction of the first computer-based training, CBT systems, that started to infiltrate. And that really, from a video arts perspective, and for many of us, then bore the creation of e-learning, as it were, or the e-learning industry. Very much first based, I guess, without video. It's funny, I see that Charles Jennings is one of the people here on the call. And Charles, I remember you and I back in 1988, I think it was, when VideoArts created its first video-based CD-ROM programs, and you were helping us out on that project way back then. So it just goes to show just how long we've been creating content and looking at that for the online world. E-learning, as I say, is very much the starting point there for how learning and learning touch points have exploded.
Suggest that we
I think that
talk about the business of how we're going to use video here, because
where
a couple of people are saying that
really very
watching
few
the video
outside the classroom,
externally
as you
is
can see in the last few
not exactly
years,
distracting.
Absolutely,
in fact, the video is tremendous quality.
Exploded, as
but
I
because
say,
we can't determine how long it's going to take people to watch the video
learners,
externally, we don't know when people have finished. So some people will take longer to watch than others, and then it's difficult for people to be interrupted then watching the video when we come back in with the webinar.
Learning and
So
engaging people with
I'd
video
suggest that we don't play the next two videos, but we enable people to watch that in their own time afterwards, especially, in fact, as we've got a lot of material to get through today. Thanks for being so flexible.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. And as I say, we'll have the links that that you'll be able to go to on YouTube or on the page that we posted, and we can supply afterwards. But a good point from Charles there. I think it does show how video can be such an engaging tool. Probably better than listening to you and I, but I shall crack on anyway. I've talked about the changes that we've seen as a business, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our annual tracking research as well in a moment or two. But there are some headlines which I guess all of us will be pretty familiar with in general terms of how the world of learning has changed. All of us are facing more time pressure in terms of delivery, and partly the rise of digital delivery has been boosted by that particular pressure. We're also facing, I think, as we heard comments of the rise of informal learning and the need for push rather than pull, to be much more flexible. And that goes for not just the learning department, but also the learner who expects to be able to pick up information, knowledge, develop their skills in a whole range of different settings. The other elements, again, are more familiar probably in terms of budget pressure. We're all being asked to do perhaps more with less budget on an annual basis. There are certainly fewer classroom courses, though importantly we'll talk about a little bit later about how that is still an important part of the mix. And it's interesting just to go back to the comments right at the start when I asked how's learning changing. This drive to shorter or bite-sized learning modules or a bite-sized approach to learning. And also the rise of electronic performance support systems or performance support for people at the point of need. That idea that we can really provide knowledge to people outside of the traditional curriculum that VideoArts grew up with in the 70s. I've talked about how learning is changing in general. There's some huge factors which have changed the way that video content is being used and how video content is changing in general terms, but also in terms of the learning world. And if I summarize that, I put it into these points. It's getting shorter. We're using YouTube today, and we've all seen the rise of YouTube in general, but also the rise, it's interesting, of something, a little story of the phenomena of video snacking. I think it was first reported in the New York Times a year or two back that there is a spike in the use of broadband within the corporate world. In the US, this was the particular example I use, where people at lunchtime go out, grab a sandwich, grab their lunch, come back to their desk, and then actually go online and start watching TV or start watching videos. And it's really been something which has grabbed my attention and made me certainly think of how that in a learning context could work as well. So video content is changing of where and how we watch it. It's also changing radically in terms of the ability we all now have to create our own video. When we began in the world of video production, it was a very expensive market to break into in any guise in terms of the cost of buying equipment, cameras, lights, etc. And it was really something where only the specialists were involved. Now all of us can be a video creator. We all have the wherewithal, usually with a high-def camera, which is now on our smartphone, and we can all create some kind of video content ourselves. And that really links to my next point, that we are now all in a world where video has become the killer app, as it were, for mobile delivery as well. I noticed it myself in terms of even again at home of having a subscription for something like Sky, and now being able to literally choose not just to watch TV live, but to be able to go back into a back catalogue and choose to watch movies, sports, whatever it may be, on demand when I want on a mobile phone. So those are all huge changes. The final point that I'd make, and I guess this is where, particularly with the idea of video on vast libraries such as Netflix and iTunes come into play as well, is that there is now so much information or so much video available that one of the biggest challenges is actually how you find what's relevant to you or what you actually want at the given point of need. And that's really where video is now beginning to align itself with the need to actually have searchability and the ability to search and find the video content you need. The other area, I think, in terms of reiterating that, is probably just more personal to VideoArts. And some of these things, again, I've mentioned a moment or two ago, but average video length, probably back in the 70s, would have been into 30 minutes, maybe to an hour-long training program. VideoArts, in some respects, revolutionized that market by creating content that was in bite-sized right way, wrong way scenarios, but still on a VHS tape, that meant it was a half-hour video. Now, as we've all heard, we're looking at a world where people want to create and demand bite-sized video. The other elements I think that we've seen are that people are beginning to adapt and move more and more to using video-based material online. So we all know the story of DVD. Sadly, we all know what's probably likely to happen to HMV after the Christmas break, and we've seen that in terms of the format. DVD is still the incumbent, but is probably, going back to something I think Bill Gates said, it's probably the last physical format for video-based material that we'll actually be using and needing a separate player for. There's been an incredible rise in streaming. That's happened first, again, brokered by this what's happened in the consumer world. But more and more we're seeing that, not just as video providers like ourselves, but all e-learning platforms and all learning and development departments.
I'd save it to the end, but there's a very rich conversation going on at the moment about the quality of
video as quickly as possible.
Presenters versus professional presenters.
And then finally,
can
again,
anybody
going back
do it,
to the comments
or can
that came
we
up at
get
the beginning,
people,
Don,
obviously VideoArts, as has been noticed, have a tremendous record of having really great presenters.
Tablets.
There are also other people who can perhaps do it on an amateur basis. Just very quickly, what's your take on this, Martin? Now, we'll come back to it later on.
As it were,
can
training.
Anybody do it?
Many of the
do
early applications
a little training,
rich,
a lot of training.
A little
what
bit
do you think?
mimicking the involvement in the e-learning industry. But we're now beginning to see some really great examples of video-rich mobile solutions as well. And I'll try and pick up on a couple of those too later on. So, no, go ahead, Don. I know, I'm watching it too. You know, Don, I think there is a space for all of these elements to work in a blended learning environment. So I do think that there's the capability for somebody who is an subject matter expert, let's say, or knows their role and their job to effectively be the presenter. I didn't mention it, but I could have touched on a great example of user-created content that we all probably know of BT and Dare to Share as a perfect example of people from the shop floor who captured themselves on video and were able to share that. And that's a great example of how that do-it-yourself, if you like, approach works fantastically well.
Back to your presentation.
I think there are then probably a hierarchy, and I did create a slide a little later that I'll come back to on this subject of where from DIY projects where you can create and produce a solution that works fantastically well to meet internal needs. There's probably then a hierarchy of being able to collaborate internally to create video solutions and to license external resource and external elements. We're seeing that ourselves at VideoArts, where we're licensing very high quality clips, as you mentioned,
and of course, a legitimate
which are
answer
then
is
being used by clients
we're
to
not
put
using it
into
at
their
all.
own e-learning programs that have their own context. So effectively putting a wrapper around our video story with their own context. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So let's move on.
Yes.
Again, let's probably throw in another question here, which is pertinent to this debate, be it video that's produced professionally or video you're using yourself. I'm going to go to some feedback from our tracking survey in a moment or two, but my question to the group out there now is, where are you actually using video? I've talked about how we've evolved and the journey we've been on. Where is video showing up in your learning strategy at the moment? Well, and that would be good to know as well. So let's see what we have there as I start to give a little bit of feedback from the survey. And again, this will be available. I think we have a white paper available that actually will be providing a link for by you, Don, as well for this. Just to give a little bit of background, this survey, as you can see, was targeted not at any particular market or sector. It really does go from very small organizations up to larger organizations. It also covers private, public sector, not-for-profit organizations as well. So we really do focus ourselves on a very wide church of clients. The first question I asked here, which talking with Don a couple of days ago, really bears out this change that has happened from the varying touch points that are available, is to ask which tools are actually being used by the sample group. And as you can see, the classroom is still probably the largest element of that, but we've seen the growth, and you can see here the impact that there has been in recent years of coaching, the rise of virtual classrooms and of online materials, in this case online books, and really, again, to re-emphasize the point that there are so many different touch points now available for us to reach learners. There are then a couple of slides which I think really throw up the picture of how that's continuing to evolve. And again, talking with you earlier, Don, one of these, I think this one bears some similarity with your surveys there for Learning Technologies Group. Just in case people are looking at this and need a little guidance, we asked the question of whether people would be using those same tools in the next 2 years, more, less, or about the same.
Organisations
And the lighter shade it signified that they'd be using it more.
And the survey I have in front of me right now is
down
the
to the
supplier
darker
side
shade
of
where
it.
they thought they'd be using it less.
There's a huge shift on their part towards
and what you can
away
see is
from,
that the classroom,
well, no, actually, it matches exactly what you've got there in the classroom training. There's a lot of
growing
churn.
a lot
Most people use it the
less.
same,
In
but we've got
fact,
people going in and
most
going
of
out
the
of
people
it.
saw
Big
it being
shift,
used
though,
the
towards
same, but
experiential
more
learning.
than any other
And also,
area,
actually,
it was seen as declining.
webinars, which you have, you've got virtual
Then
classrooms
see
here.
the huge
That's
rise in
exactly the
more
same as we have.
informal
A big shift
areas such as coaching.
It's interesting always when you've got research that says the same thing from two different angles.
And we see a
say
real
what we're doing
increase
the
there in
LPI
things like
totally
virtual
resonates with
classrooms,
what you've
which
got here.
again are beginning to replace the traditional face-to-face classroom session. Don, I think you had some comments around this as well, didn't you? Yeah. Great. Great. Again, be interested to hear everyone's comments on this and whether that mirrors your own experience currently as well. As we mentioned, we'll let you share the videos later on. So let me go to the next question, which really links back to the one I asked you for your feedback on. Where do you actually use video? And I'll try and help here rather than everyone crane their neck by looking sideways. Video in the classroom, which is the first column here, is still within our user group the main delivery method, though that's changed, as I mentioned already, Don, away from putting a DVD into a machine or putting a DVD into a PC to play it, towards using streaming or towards using a rental download as an alternative method to deliver video. The other areas that we flagged off earlier, right at the front of the session, on which I guess there are probably a few more comments coming through as well here, are that people are looking for short pieces of bite-sized learning. I guess it's something we've personally anticipated and seen probably over the last 3 or 4 years, where we've moved from effectively creating a catalogue of off-the-shelf titles.
Riding shotgun on that. We'll pick it up at the end. I don't want to interrupt your momentum. You carry on.
To actually licensing thousands of video clips, effectively a sort of box of video Lego that clients can license and put into classroom training or wherever else they want to use it. So that's, again, mirroring our experience very much. The other areas for video, yes, self-authored e-learning I touched on. Off-the-shelf programs are in there as well. For mobile learning, that's really gone from nothing now into 15% in the last year or so. And that certainly is a driver, I think, for us as to where you need to put video to reach the learner when they are not sat at a desk or in front of a PC any longer. So let's move on from where people are using video. And again, Don, I'll leave it to you to pick out the comments there. We've got such a lot of dialogue going on, which is great. Yeah. Next one up is, again, really linking back to what the debate was about where you source it from. And again, I'd re-emphasize that there is probably a place for all of these elements that we've seen. Again, looking at the group, buying material effectively off the shelf or licensing material is a large part of the response. But look at this. More than 50% of people are now saying they make their own. They create their own video. And that's a real sea change from the picture maybe only 5 years ago, where the ability is there in the right context and where it works to create something on a do-it-yourself basis. The market for bespoke or custom-built training, again, it's still a sizable area that people focus on, but there is then obviously the market where people look to source material from the internet. Again, that can be an area where there are challenges of finding something that's of good quality and that it doesn't infringe copyrights, etc. But the material is obviously there and people are using it that way as well. Really, this is, I think, Don, what you were alluding to a little earlier, in that kind of hierarchy where sourcing video or creating it. And I threw this up after we'd spoken yesterday about the program and about the research feedback. And there's certainly as I say, a model that seems to evolve where a rapid response to a very specific internal set of circumstances, or the need to communicate information and use all the great benefits of video, a standard message across a wide area with a video online makes it a great tool for a DIY approach. In the middle, we're really seeing this area blossom where it's one much more of customizing or collaborating. Now that could be internally within an organization, or it could be with a partner or a licensing library like VideoArts, but people are taking content that exists and putting it into their own context. And there is then underneath that a much wider potential area as well, which still remains for what I would call off the shelf or generic skills, knowledge transfer, behaviors, and general training in terms of bringing people up to speed in, be it management, be it sales, be it service, where off-the-shelf resources provide a great way to develop the community using video-based materials. There's lots of talk, and I'm sure when we all meet in later in January at Olympia, it will be one of the themes as well around the shift that we're all seeing from formal to informal learning. Lots of people talk around the 70-20-10 model, and I think, Don, you've run sessions around this as well in the past. But I picked up on something really that just helped me kind of define where video fits into that from a book and an article that's written by a guy called Nick Van Dam, who I've met via the Macy Consortium in past years. And his book is something called Next Learning Unwrapped.
And perhaps
and again, there is a very similar theme that we can see emerging here of where he's predicting that formal learning in future may only account for about 10% of the learning framework and a new learning framework. And that could be that mix of physical and virtual classroom. And we've seen how even within that, that's moving more away from physical to virtual. But it could also involve more formal online assessment, more formal self-paced, web-based training, and more of the measures which I guess a traditional LMS would be able to track and report on. Where he really does... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Don. Neither am I. Great. Thanks, Don. Thank you, Charles. Yes, so I think the formal element and the formal element perhaps with the sort of formal process of an LMS behind it is there. There is then the rise, as we've all seen this morning, of informal learning. And Nick had broken that into 3 elements. I'll start from the bottom with career learning, and that's where coaching that I've touched on and mentoring play a large role in the development of people within their careers, as well as specific projects they may be on, assignments. More and more for the generation coming into the workplace, career learning means internships as well, potentially paid, sometimes unpaid, but actually gaining experience in an informal setting is at the bottom there. There's then on-demand learning, and I talked about electronic performance support. I talked about reaching the learner at the point of need, and that's where we've seen the rise of podcasts, so pre-recorded podcasts, things like this webinar today, where rather than joining us the week before Christmas, many of you will be listening to this over your Christmas holiday break. It's being able to access learning apps and videos on a just-in-time or on-demand basis. And again, going back to an earlier point with ebooks, being able to reference material potentially on a journey to a meeting, or really being able to dictate when you do your learning. So on demand is the second part. And then the last element is social learning. And that's really, again, a subject which is rich in debate at the moment of how social networks, how communities of practice, and how collaboration and sharing will impact corporate learning and learning in more general terms over the coming years. And that really can be that rich mixture of expert direction. I talked about the message from the CEO or from the expert on the shop floor. Doesn't matter where they are in the organization. Video is a great way for them to share that. There are different groups where material can be shared, micro-sharing. Gaming and simulations still have a big future within the learning mix. And then I think we're seeing more and more the maturity of some online communities and of interactive video and of blogs, away from it being potentially seen as the fad or the thing of the future to actually becoming an embedded and an important part of the mix. Thank you for the explanation there, Charles, as well, and for the link there for the video, which I can recommend as well. So we've seen a lot of background. We've talked a lot about where we think it might be moving, and I wanted to just really finish up, Dom, with some very quick examples of particularly where video is showing up in some of these future guises. The first example is actually from Canon, who we've been working with over the last 12 months or so, particularly with their pan-European operation. And this is a great example of where a standard video message can be communicated across something like 8,000 staff and managers across a learning management system environment, in this case with Cornerstone. The difference here was they had such a variety of partners in different countries that they needed to look at 6 or a minimum of 6 different languages. And that ranged from Italian, German, Russian, French, Spanish, all of which benefited from a standard communication of management competencies and bite-sized video, but where we've been able to do that utilizing local language subtitles as well. So a nice example of really how video, particularly for the people who are joining us from overseas there, can be a great way to provide a standard message, but also utilize local language. The others, I think are much more focused around mobile. And one's a good example that I like here that is a project that is still rolling out in actual fact as Cable and Wireless become part of Vodafone. And that's to provide product training with video-rich elements for Cable and Wireless sales staff via mobile devices. And that works across Android, BlackBerry, and iPhone in this particular case. And there are really 2 parts to this, Don. One is specific product training and specific updates that can be pushed out on a just-in-time basis around new products, giving people the chance to see video clips, read background information, and also give feedback, and for that feedback to be sent back online to be viewed. But it's also now with VideoArts element in mind as well, we've been able to fuse that with providing generic skills training. So as well as being able to get specific organization sales training on product, there's also background training on best practice and best behaviors for sales and customer service training. And finally, as an example, which again is one of our partners here, who are an organization called NetX. I think Mike Byrne from NetX is on the call here as well with us. So hello, Mike. And we're working with NetX in particularly with their brand of Learning Coffee, which is driven, I would say, very much around the development of bite-sized learning. And in particular, this is a little case study I wanted to touch on of one of the Spanish banks, Banesto, who are actually part of the Santander group. And we're actually working along with the team at NetX to develop a a range of business skills online training modules for middle managers. The difference in these particular modules is that they will be developed using a couple of emerging technologies. One is something called dynamic design, which means that the course that you can see some grabs on will format itself to play not only on a PC, but also on a tablet or on a mobile phone, and give the best user experience, whichever the device you're using. And the second point is that each of these courses at the click of a button will be delivered in either English or Spanish language. So literally,
okay, just
we
so
have
people
now
know,
the
TinCan
capability for
is the
somebody to
son of
customize the
Scorm,
experience
coming out in
to their
Q1
preferred
next year. A
language
lot
as well.
of trailing of it,
We're
and
actually
of course
rolling
we've
this
got to
out. I
speak
think
on
they have something
TinCan
like
Learning
12,000
Technologies Conference in
employees,
January.
but
The
again,
key
this
thing there
is
is
with
that
an eye to
I think
improving
what
language
Martin's alluding
skills,
to is that this
creating a bilingual
liberates materials
workforce,
from having to be
but
delivered
being able
necessarily
to
through and
develop
from a
this across
system.
multi-devices
It's
and
possible,
link in, by the way, to
given the
their
right
Sabre
conditions, to
LMS.
pick up what people have done with these materials,
So that's
no
a
matter where
nice,
they're
neat
delivered from.
idea,
Is that
perhaps, of
true in
where
summary, Martin?
next year we'll all be engaging more and more with video and engaging across a range of platforms and in a range of ways with dynamic design. It also touches on one other element within formal learning that, along with NetX, we're beginning to develop these courses with an eye to the introduction of TinCan and the TinCan API, so that more of this informal learning that might happen when people are not on the corporate network can be recorded and backed up from a learning record system back into the corporate learning system. Yes, yeah, that sounds like a great sort of introduction, and certainly look out for that next January in the sessions that you mentioned there, Don. So let me tie things up, if I may, very quickly with, I guess, some tips for engaging with video anywhere and at any time. And hopefully what you'll see and what we're learning as well is that learning is no longer just an event. It's not a physical event that used to happen in a classroom or in a room. It's really now a series of events, and you need to think when you're using video of where and how you can use it. It's a great device still, as I've seen from the comments, in terms of the benefits of video, but being able to frame it yourself brings even more value to it. And also by choosing that bite-sized specific piece, which now with the range of tools available, you can do to create your own bite-sized elements. Video is fantastic as a way to introduce a subject, a story, a stimulus. Use it in that way, and think about I guess the original meaning of the word video, back to the Latin of video as in I see, I understand. That's really where it's most powerful. What's changed though is it can show up in all sorts of new places. So think about those new learning opportunities, both in the formal and informal framework that I mentioned. Think about it in rapid deployment tools and putting content into your own context, developing online HR or managers manuals with video clips. Coaching is growing, but was aided hugely by having an external reference like a video library to review with. And then finishing up with that whole move towards performance support, point of need knowledge, and being able to see how video works there. And again, that shift that we're seeing on our high streets as well, away from physical video libraries to a virtual learning center. Now, really finish up with a point here, which I think I heard at ASTD a few years back, which was that content is king, but context is the kingdom. One final story, and so something I picked up again listening with to Elliot Macy and talking of his experience, which again kind of mirrored mine as somebody growing up as a kid in the 70s, was at that point, you think about how much television has changed. At that point, we had three stations. They hadn't long moved from black and white to color in the 70s, but importantly, there were basically just three networks.
Absolutely.
TV watching was done by a schedule, and everybody had to watch the same thing at once. You watched, let's say, your favorite show for an hour at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night, or you didn't watch a TV program at all. Now think about how that's changed in the television world. TV is now, the experience is completely different. It's bigger, more colorful. There's 3D on the way. There's one of these devices everywhere in our rooms at home. We even have them, as I mentioned, now on our mobile as well. So the management and timing of TV has switched, and it's now under your control.
That's great.
You, the viewer,
Thank you so much, Martin. Listen, because I had some slight delay at the beginning getting
traditional
started,
schedule,
I'm going to run over a little bit.
You can watch
so that we can
thousands
have
of channels. You can watch it by a whole range of different devices.
Summarize it.
You can now watch it on demand when it suits you. You can stream it to your laptop, to your smartphone. And you can actually fast forward and choose the bits that you actually
Tony started off saying, I don't like a
and
script.
that I guessed on is where I think the world of video
like
in learning is also moving very rapidly as well. It's actually where this world of workplace learning and the use of video
Jeremy said, no,
I
like a script, I like storyboarding, it saves time and money.
A few years ago, it was very much like the old TV schedule, but now it's actually about learner choice, on-demand delivery, personalization and collaboration, creating social ratings within your own organisation. All of those elements are open for us in the learning world to use with video as well. And that's where I think it's really exciting as we close out
Tony's just corrected me there. I like storyboarding, but not detailed scripts. Thank you, Tony. And Anna said, look, she's had problems, and I think we can all relate to this, of giving somebody a microphone
we've reached the end.
They just go off on a rambling monologue, which I think was a great term. And goodness knows, that's something I think we've all noticed. And then you have this issue of having to go back and edit. So obviously the correct VideoArts answer is, well, don't try and do it yourself. Go to VideoArts and buy their stuff. But putting that to one side, if from your tremendous experience in this area, Martin, if people are going out to this, what's the right balance to get between formality and informality, letting people go, and how much structure do you need to give people?
Right.
I think that's a really good point. And Lee Bryant makes the point, look, let's be a bit more forgiving. Many highly hit YouTube videos are arguably of low quality. He says, keep the videos short. And it's an issue. I'd add to that, Lee. Yes, keep them short.
I think as you
make them relevant. People will sit through a lot.
Donald, there's probably a range of different options that are there.
Which Tony's brought up is the real importance
I was at Online Educa in Berlin a couple of weeks ago, and there was actually a separate stream running this week called Online, Video Educa, which really addressed many of those challenges. So I'd advise people maybe to go online and have a look for some of the follow-ups from that. And when I was there, I actually caught up with Donald Clark, and I remember a very good line he used was that,
just a quick point, Tony,
we all have
I like the phraseology. So it doesn't
Microsoft
like bite
Word
size
on
because
our
topic
PC, but it doesn't
focused
make us all
training.
Pulitzer
I
Prize
think that's a
winners.
great
And the
point.
fact that we
Jonathan
all
said, but
now
how
have
do you
a
present
camera
the
doesn't
value
necessarily
of
mean
video?
we're all
Because it
going to
can seem to be
produce
quite
fantastic
expensive.
video
So how do
material.
you present the
So
value of video
I think
to people who
understanding
write the checks in an
the
organisation?
actual
It's a fair point.
final
If the
output of the
alternative is a
material that
PDF or
you're
something that just
looking
takes
to
people through something,
develop
how do you make
is
sure that
important
people
before you
understand
even
that the
get to
video
a
might do the job
scripting
better?
stage. Yes, yeah.
Mm. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
And actually, of course, in this sort of situation, strong anecdotal evidence is usually very powerful if you can point towards either somebody else having done it or somebody in your organisation who's used video effectively. That's a great way of doing it. And of course, we've had one comment from Andrew, just compare it with the cost of shipping trainers all over the country.
I think,
and there's
again, the
done.
useful thing to probably think about in that respect is the impact that that video and sound, importantly, John, the impact that that video and sound have on the learning experience. I think I remember, again, a presentation I saw in Berlin at Online Educa referenced a Wharton Business School research that said it was something like 50% higher retention if people are actually watching
Sorry, Colin,
video and
can you just
audio rather than just reading
detail what
about something.
WCAG is for
So
us in
reading a
detail, and then
PDF
we'll
in
come back to the
comparison
question. I think I know
is
what it is, but let's just
perhaps
make sure I've got that spelled out for me.
a
Dana says
much duller
the combination of
experience. There
video,
also is just
training
that
video
element
coupled
that,
with some sort
a
of
video
some sort
can
of testing
create
is the best
much
way to
more
prove
of
it. So
a
you show the impact.
framework
Actually, Dana said
and can
SCORM
create much
testing. I
more
think you
and
meant
can
SCORM testing, but I do like the idea of SCORM
engage
testing.
people much more than
than
just a written piece of paper.
I know that's not what you meant, and we can all make do things fast. Labine says he's a big fan of keep it short and simple. Exactly. Okay, coming back to our list here, Dana raised a very interesting point earlier on about soft skills and hard skills. A lot of people were talking in the chat at the time. Thank you, Con, for that.
Exactly.
We were talking in the chat at the
And
time
we talked about budget pressure being one of the big drivers here, and it's
but actually, of course,
certainly
video is
where
tremendously good. And
I think we're
you've
seeing
probably chosen
generally
video art at
a
helping people
reduction in those
understand
number of
soft
those
skills.
classroom sessions, and that being
Is there anything
replaced or
that
supplemented with
you
more
perhaps I
virtual
shouldn't ask
learning
this question,
classroom
Martin, but is
areas,
there anything that you
and the use
can't
of
or shouldn't
video
use
in terms
video for
of
effectively?
keeping that community of practice in touch with each other? Yeah.
Can't be you. Let's go on to Con's question. I think we're going to have to wrap up, though I do just want to give a quick hat tip to, who was it? Lighting. Ben talked about lighting. And you're absolutely right, Ben. If you're doing your own video, you can pay 120 quid for a couple of lights.
Given the kind of nature and the rise of video, not outside of VideoArts and back to that sort of YouTube, I don't think there's anything that people haven't tried to capture in one way or another in terms of video, is there, Don? Where it's certainly in terms of showing people behaviors, skills, attitudes, and demonstrating
World
those in
Congress and
a
Accessibility
less
Guidelines,
threatening
version 2,
environment without that
WCAG.
scorn factor, as you say,
how does video
really where
play?
video works
how does it
fantastically
work
well.
within the context of
Where
accessibility?
video
People
also works
who
very
are
well is
blind,
in much more
visually
instructional
impaired,
kind of
or those who
how-to,
are in
and we've
fact
seen that
hearing impaired,
in terms of
how
the rise of
video
other
work
sort of online video methods to train desktop skills, be it, or other methods too. I really would genuinely say I don't think there is an area where a video in one guise or another, either in an instructional way or to use a story or a parable or use it as a stimulus, I think is always going to add a value to it. It does, yeah. And for those of you in London, I know I've been riding around on the tube, and there's a big ad for a huge light that you can even plug onto your smartphone now. So even with that, you can improve the quality of what you're doing.
Yeah. Very good point. It does depend on what you're showing, of course, but yes, of course, a lot of video art stuff, and indeed a lot of stuff we use in learning generally is going to be story focused, and that can be transcribed and used in different ways. We've run out of time here. I know we've got more questions coming through, but we're almost 10 minutes over, so I'm going to have to wrap up on this one, which frustrates me slightly because we've had a great presentation. There's been a lot here that's been tremendously valuable,
and we
the
certainly have
discussion, as always, I've learned a lot
experts
from
in
you
terms of
guys,
our
as I
e-learning
always
division
do.
and development that work on where we can follow best practice. Certainly in terms of people where they're using subtitles or using text and closed captioning, we've been doing that
let me just
for
quickly
many years, whatever the format may be. We've also have a number of programs
URLs
now that
over,
use
so
audio describe, which is again another method that I think we worked with the RNIB actually on that project.
A lot of people say Merry
18
Christmas.
months ago.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Lee.
So
thank you, everybody else.
there's a place
Don't go away, though. Let's just wrap up.
That can be found
Learning and Skills Group
again,
is the
particularly
place
with our
where you'll
style,
find the
where it's more
recording,
of
the
a
slides,
story,
the web
to
chat
actually
available. It is a community of
get people to
6,000
engage
plus
with
learning
that story in that way.
professionals. It is free. Come and join us. The recording, I hope we'll be able to get it online Monday, Christmas Eve, but the slides and the web chat should be available tomorrow, and indeed the entire background to the entire back catalogue of our webinars, which are also available now on YouTube, by the way. Don't forget to come along to Learning Technologies, but I'm sure you all know that. And please don't run away, because at 12 o'clock, in less than an hour's time, we'll have Dave Lewis, who looks a little bit like Bruce Willis, but he's not. He's Dave Lewis. He's coming
fantastic feedback from everyone. Thank you. Well, I look forward to continuing it when we're at Learning Technologies as well. So for everyone that's going to be there in January,
I've been through this rehearsal, and it's a great story. Getting your audience to react the way you want, either in person or virtually. It's going to be fantastic. So I hope you'll be able to join us at 12 o'clock with Dave Lewis. And if you're not, then yes, please do have a Merry Christmas and Happy Holiday. And I look forward to joining you at Learning Technologies and afterwards in February when we come back with our next Learning and Skills Group webinar. Just remains for me once more to say thanks very much, everyone, for your thoughts. And Martin, thanks again for a great display of how video can be used to access everybody, including generation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.